Welcome, everybody, to the Week 11 edition of Beyond the Model NFL DFS picks, GPP strategy, and lineup advice for DraftKings, FanDuel, maybe even throw in some Yahoo as well. We're here to talk it up for the NFL. I'm your host, Moose, at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. Co-founder and data guru here at OccupyFantasy.com. Alongside Brian, at BrianJesterFF on Twitter is where you can find him. He's co-founder and CEO of OccupyFantasy.com. How's it going, Brian?
What's up, Moose? Just housing some lunch right now, some late lunch before the stream and UFC starts. Schedule is tightening up, but glad to be here. Talk some NFL, and looks like a pretty good slate overall, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you said right before we got on, you got some food. I said, are we doing Beyond the ASMR? Like, is that what we're doing? but yeah, it's week 11, over halfway through this.
I think people.
You there?
Yeah, can you hear me, Moose?
Yeah, you went blank and then just said 1,000 words.
Oh, sorry about that for anyone lost. I said, you think people leave our streams quickly when we talk about bad stacks? Just me starting eating would eradicate all viewers. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we're here about we're over halfway through the season, and Brian, it's starting to, at least for me, I'm the last one of in our family that's in a survivor pool. So I feel like the pressure's a little on, worrying about that. Got some stacks going on in the holidays. I don't know. It seems like a really fun time. So let's just jump
definitely.
Let's just jump right into it. Brian, I'll let you kick it off first. It seems like this is one of those slates where there's not too much news that we're waiting on. There's one big piece of news, one expected news, but I'll let you go first about that.
So it looks like we are waiting on Tyler Lockett news. Didn't practice all week, but he's one of those rare players that gets the veteran treatment, could potentially play without practicing all week. None of the beat reporters nor the coaches were that negative about his availability, but you still have to wonder if he's going to play because he's been dealing with this for a couple weeks now. This is the first week where he hasn't practiced the entire week, so that has changed a bit. We like that stack, and we'll get to that. But if Lockett is out, obviously that boosts DK Metcalf's target share, but then opens up even more for Jackson Bobo. So that is something to monitor. And then we're just waiting for the official word that Devon Achane is activated from Miami. And I know everyone's been waiting to play him once again. His projected ownership, both him and Mostert, their projected ownership is super low on both sites. I imagine that will update once we get official word he's activated. But if not, I would just be shocked if they both stay under 10%. I don't think it's gonna be the case, Moose, but that's how we have it projected right now, which would be crazy.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like we've figured out for 4+ weeks how to handle this Miami stack. And now that we get Achane back, it's like, not entirely sure how to fit him in there. But that's why we'll figure it out while we're talking about it. So for those that are new here, if you want to say hello, say hi, ask questions, you can do all that. We basically take 30 minutes of your time. We talk about some stacks, talk about some high-level stuff, talk about some new meta stuff that we're trying, and just, chat it up for 30 minutes. If you have questions, go ahead and ask. If you just want to sit back and listen, all good as well. So I'll kick it off, Brian. I think we actually have the same number one ranking, and that is that Detroit-Chicago game. Pretty big spread, so I understand if you don't want to do a bring back on that. But at least for me, Brian, there's just so many weapons. We get Justin Fields back for Chicago. We know what he can do. We've seen how explosive both these offenses are, and they're not too expensive on either site, but yeah, I'm curious what you think about that stack.
Yeah, it ranks number one for me. I know Chris wrote it up in the plug as well. And historically, we're not looking to stack teams that are touchdown or more underdogs, as is the case with Justin Fields and the Bears this week. However, that is a little bit thrown out the window if that quarterback has shown a high upside. Remember, Justin Fields top 5 round ADP in best ball during the summer and right before the season started, and when they can run like Justin Fields can as well. So I think Fields is the type of guy where you don't have to stack more than one teammate with him. So Fields plus DJ Moore, Fields plus Cole Kmet, running back with one of the Lions. The one potential issue with this game stack is we could see both teams run the ball a ton. We've seen that with Detroit. We saw them while Amon-Ra St. Brown had a fantastic game last week. We both saw Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery have a huge day as well. And if Chicago offers little resistance on defense, that could be a way that the Detroit side of the stack fails. So maybe it sounds crazy, but the safer side is Fields plus one of the Detroit running backs. But either way, I think there's a lot of ways this game opens up. It has the potential to be one of the highest scoring on the board. And while it's not as attractive price-wise and perhaps even projections-wise as the other main stack that everyone's excited for, this is one kind of like LA and Detroit last week was a stack that went a little under the radar.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing that definitely I'm staying away from, but looking at prices maybe as like a super high risk, I don't even know play. The running back situation for Chicago, Khalil Herbert he is returning, but it's going to be just kind of like a conglomerate mixed share of Herbert, Foreman, Roschon Johnson as well. They're all super cheap, between like four to 4,700, 5,600 on DraftKings, 6,000, 6,800 on FanDuel. Are you mixing them in at all? Maybe getting that like low, 4K. Maybe they get the touchdown in your stack, or that's something you're kind of just staying away from.
I guess we'll monitor, right? If all three are active, it's probably an avoid. But you have to remember back in the early part of the season when Herbert was fully healthy, Deonta Foreman was just a healthy scratch, and they just rolled with Herbert and Roschon. I don't know if they do that again, given how well Foreman has run in Herbert's absence. But if one of these guys is inactive, then that does open it up to now we have two cheap guys instead of three cheap guys fighting for the scraps. So I think it's something we have to monitor and then maybe be willing to adjust if you're building 20 or 150 lineups and we get inactive news at 11:30.
Yep, exactly. We have T Money in the chat. He says, "I need trade help." Yeah,
let's hear it.
Yeah, let's hear it. We'll figure it out. So, Brian, I talked about the first act, the Chicago Detroit game that I like both number one and our rankings. What's the next stack that you want to talk about?
Well, probably involving the guy you see on screen here, the cover boy, the Daily Plug. Probably the most popular stack of the week, as has been the case with any Houston game seemingly in the past few weeks. It's Houston and Arizona. CJ Stroud is going to be paired up with Nico Collins, who's back, Tank Dell, Noah Brown. And I keep saying thankfully because I haven't been playing this veteran who hasn't done much the entire career go off at like 350 yards in 2 weeks. So I haven't been a part of the Noah Brown train. He's likely going to be out. That's just more condensed target share for Nico Collins and Tank Dell and perhaps Dalton Schultz. But then Arizona side, we're right back, Moose, like we never left. Kyler is back. We're back to stack in Arizona. Marquise Brown. Trey McBride, who is just outstanding, right? There's no superlatives that are too great for how well he's been playing and the type of target share he's been seeing. James Conner, obviously, Michael Wilson, Rondell Moore. So lots of pieces to this game. And I think, Moose, this is the prototypical, and I believe Chris called this out in the plug as well, the prototypical 3x2, maybe 4x2 if you get crazy, but definitely 3x2 small field stack where it's cheap enough on all angles, no matter which quarterback you choose, Stroud or Kyler. And it offers a really high floor and ceiling to build the rest of your lineup around.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last week as well, doing that 3x2, maybe 4x2 crazy in small field contests. I mean, there's just so many weapons. We've seen both of these teams put up 30, 40 points at the drop of a hat easily. One of the higher team total games. A couple injuries on Houston's defense that gives a slight bump to Arizona as well. I like this stack. I haven't had a chance to look too much at the pricing, but yeah, I mean, speaking of just, cover boy, Trey McGronk he's just so cheap. 4,400 on DraftKings, 5,900 on FanDuel.
He should be like 7K, dude.
Yeah.
Like, that's just them not carrying, not adjusting aggressively enough. He should be probably the most expensive tight end on the slate, and I don't think that's even a hot take to say.
Yeah, and that's why he's going to be probably 20+% in all contests. So I think even as a standalone play, McBride is great, but in a stack, it's just incredible.
You can't agree.
Yep, definitely. So Team Money reacts. This has to be a fake team, but also great trade potential opportunity. He says 8-man PPR, 2 flex, Burrow, Eckler, Williams, Chase, Waddle, Kelsey, Puka, Debo. Bench Dobbs, Fields, McBride, James Conner, Rice, Lions defense. That has to be a fake team. That's way too many.
Well, it's only 8-man league, so in theory those are fake.
Yeah, that's true. He says, do I trade Kelsey for Kincaid and Josh Allen? Just lost Burrow.
I mean, you have Trey McGronk on your bench, so you don't really need another tight end. I think if you roll with McBride the rest of the year, you're probably fine. I see Dobbs. If you think of like a 12 or 14 team league, Dobbs is enough to get you through the rest of the year. But 18, you basically have to have a stud quarterback or a top performing quarterback, which Dobbs is performing as, by the way. But yeah, I think whatever you can do to get an Allen type quarterback would be helpful in an 18 league. And you have enough depth here that I think I would be okay overpaying for whoever that quarterback may be.
Yeah, I mean, you basically have to overpay, I think, for a quarterback to get there. So yeah, I would take that trade. Cool beans. So let's take a look here. The next stack that I have is actually just the one-sided for me, and that is the Miami Raiders. I only like the Miami side. Maybe you can convince me, Brian, to pull a bring back there, but no. We've seen again how explosive Miami is against teams that aren't good. Raiders aren't necessarily that good, so it's one of those. We play them to a number one quarterback in the model with an extremely high OF index. It's kind of interesting. 14-point favorites, super expensive, so that does mean you have to get different elsewhere. I think with cheap pieces like McBride, there's a couple cheap wide receivers as well that allow you to fit this in. But I mean, anytime you have Miami, it does get a little tough with a, what is it, $7,700 on DraftKings, $8,400 on FanDuel quarterback, and like a $9K wide receiver, almost $10K on FanDuel, $9,800, which is crazy. But yeah, Adams, Tyreek Hill, 1-2 wide receiver in the model, and then we do have, if Achane is expected to be activated on the IR, gives us a bunch of weapons. We talked about some ownership being low there. That could be a way to get different. Just too many weapons on the Miami side to not even consider it as a snack.
I mean, you have to, if you're playing multiple lineups. If you're playing one lineup, I understand the pricing, and the median outcome is they don't pay off their price tags. But we've seen their upside, like they've literally scored 70 points, and Tyreek can break a slate anytime he's on it. So if you're making multiple lineups, it is mandatory to have Miami exposure. Jalen Waddle, underperforming wide receiver, and the most interesting thing, and I've been losing money nonstop playing Devontae Adams the past few weeks, which is crazy because I lost so much money not playing Devontae Adams last year, is that he's the top of the underperforming wide receiver list, rightfully so. But he has underperformed his expected points in the last 3 weeks alone by 30 fantasy points. Some players don't even score 30 fantasy points in 3 weeks. And a lot of fantasy receivers don't score 30 points in weeks. He's been expected to score 30 more points than he's actually scored. Yes, that has to do with Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell throwing him the ball. But eventually, he's going to have a game, right? And what better game than here? The stack, his ownership continues to stay relatively low. I don't have it pulled up right now. What's his ownership right now?
Whose?
Devontae Adams.
Right, 2% on DraftKings, 4% on FanDuel.
Yeah, man, you got to do it. So obviously, it gets expensive quick if you bring Tyreek back with Devontae Adams. If you're looking for Curtis Samuel piece, Cedric Wilson's a guy that I'm interested in. Braxton Berrios is a little banged up. We'll see if he plays or not. But Cedric Wilson ran 30 routes in that London game. So at his cheap price tag, running 30 routes in a blowout game, that could be a way you get different. It's the perfect game for a Curtis Samuel piece. Either way, it's something you have to have exposure to. But I think because of the price moves, it's not the number one overall stack.
Yeah, just trying to do some hand building stuff here. It gets expensive very quick, no matter which route you go. So, yeah, it's definitely pretty tough. But no, enough pieces there that I won't hate you for making that lineup. Let's see here. We got a question here from Chinedu. It says DTR. I know I asked in the other video, but I thought I'd ask here. Can jam in Hill and Cup with Robinson and Singletary. We haven't talked about Cleveland at all. That whole division is just flooded with injuries. But what's your thought on DTR?
Yeah, so clearly he wants to play DTR badly, right? Asking him about him on two separate videos. You want that confirmation bias. And is it Chinedu? Let us know if we're pronouncing your name correctly. We've seen you on the channel before. I want to make sure we get that right. Chinedu, if that's wrong, let us know. But Chinedu wants to know about DTR. And I get it. It's part of the new meta, right, that we've talked about in these videos the last couple of weeks is playing the cheaper quarterbacks. I mean, that game total is literally 32.5. That is lower than most preseason game totals we've seen. So it is rough. Obviously, we like DTR. We were big fans of him in the preseason. But the possibility is that he is not great. They're still got a banged up offensive line, right? You look at the one game he did start. He threw for 121 yards and had 3 interceptions and ran for 24 yards. I mean, that's literally like 4 fantasy points. That's not enough, right? If he has a normal game, a normal bad game, you can get there. If he has an actual bad game, which the total dictates he might against the Steelers pass rush, I don't know. Steelers are missing some guys. I understand it. Believe me, I get it. I'm one to play bad quarterbacks. I think if it's your main lineup, probably not. But if you want to have some exposure to it, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And he says correct pronunciation, so we're on fire here with the pronunciations lately.
There we go. Let's go. I mean, I don't hate it in the fact that you can jam in literally every good player. And so at what point does it become a standpoint of even if he scores, 5-10 points, if everyone else just explodes out of your lineup and there's no other combinations you can do to get there, then it kind of works out. We've seen it before, not to compare Classic with Showdown, but we've seen a couple Showdown slates where you have to play that cheap captain for the salary savings, and that's not even like the top scoring player, but because the way everyone else scores around him, it works. So I can see it work, and especially if he goes off, it definitely gets a little eye emoji. So I don't know, but it is, the total is like 30, or actually 32.5, like you said. But yeah, that's a very low one. I don't know. I don't hate it, but I don't necessarily love it.
I'll give one more reason, right? I know Sinead, I know you want the reason. He's playing MME, so if you want to mix them in, I get it. Pittsburgh is missing starting inside linebacker Cole Holcomb, lost the year with injury a couple weeks ago. Then they lost his replacement, Quan Alexander, last week. He's on injured reserve. They're also still without Minkah Fitzpatrick, and they're also without Keanu Neal. So I think if you want to play Njoku with DTR, or you want to play DTR naked, the injury situation presents itself that it could be a thing. Like if you're looking for reasons to go outside the projections, that's the way to go. So I'll give you one more reason to go play DTR.
And I think I'll say the last thing: if you do the Njoku stack, you're already getting off the McBride train, the chalk. So you're switching from a 20 to 40% owned tight end to a 1 to 2% tight end.
Right.
So for roughly the same price, you get a little bit of savings. So slowly coming around to it.
Really quickly on that point, Chris tried to sneak it by in the plug, but I read the plug. Said don't tell Brian, but 2 tight end builds are a thing this week. And I think it could be. We're not big generally on 2 tight ends, right? But there are some times you play McBride. I know he likes Kincaid this week. Maybe it's Njoku. I think that 3 to 4K range, it might be even more viable moves if you do play that expensive Miami stack. Mm-hmm. So I don't hate it, right? But we don't want to play 2 cheap-ass, terrible tight ends. We want to play 2 guys, if we go this route, that are operating as wide receiver 1s or 2s, which is the case for a select group of guys, like McBride especially, and like Kincaid, and Njoku maybe, I don't know. But I do see some merit to it this week, more so certainly than other weeks.
Yes, absolutely. So cool. So I talked about the Miami. We talked about Cleveland a little bit. Brian, what's your next stack that you want to talk about?
All right. I think I'll go with. I think we're on the same page with a few of these. Yeah. How about the Rams and the Seahawks? They get Matthew Stafford back, which is clearly a major boost to the offense instead of Brett Rippon. Cooper Kupp, underperforming wide receiver. Puka, obviously. And then we have the potential Tyler Lockett news. Now, the thing with this is that is a 4 p.m. game. So it's possible we don't know about Lockett before the slate locks, which, if you're going to be around, that's totally fine. You can make that work, right? You can maybe leave an extra lineup slot in addition to the Seattle wide receiver spot to give some flexibility with moves. But I like this one a lot, Moose. I think both sides have the potential. It's a really tight spread. Playmakers on both sides. Underperforming wide receivers galore. DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp. And with the split backfields, that's how it busts, right? If the different running backs get different work. But I think if somehow it does flow to the passing game here, it's a really unowned, underrated stack.
I do think that too, especially with it being 4 p.m. and the injury news. I think it's one of those things where it's like the once a year where you have to be around at the 4 p.m. lock, unless we get like overnight news or something. But I like it. Again, 2 more explosive offenses. It is a little bit more. There are some expensive pieces in there, so you do have to work around some of those constraints. But no, I don't hate it at all. It's seems like a pretty good stack to me. I have them ranked, I think, the same one that you do. Yeah.
Cool. All right, sounds good. And I think let me look at the the plug, and Chris doesn't have that one, so we get finally get different from Chris because we've been on the Chris bandwagon here for basically every stack so far. So here's the point in the show where we start to differentiate a little from Chris's actual good recommendations.
Yeah, before we do that, David has a question. He says, Happy Thanksgiving. Appreciate you guys for what you do. Thank you, David. He says, taking one high dollar shot this year on FanDuel, would you wait for the WFFC or not? Budget is around $300.
Good question. What's up, David? Happy Thanksgiving. Happy early Thanksgiving to you as well. Good question. So really it comes down to what your goal is with the $200 or $300, right? If you're okay with losing that money and you just want a shot at a huge payday, the WFFC is probably the best shot on FanDuel, I would say. However, if you're looking to grow your bankroll and you want to take one shot, I would wait and play. They have the $200, the 2222. I want to say they have a 333 sometimes on FanDuel, but those are much smaller. I mean, less than 500, and sometimes the 222, some slates, and even the late posting ones are less than 200 players. So a much better chance of winning, much better chance of an actual return on investment. You're not going to have a chance at $1 million outside the WFFC Fan Championship. So if that's your goal, go for that. But if you're looking for ROI, the best bet is that one of the single entry high dollar ones, because otherwise you're up against multiple pros playing 150 lineups at $250 a pop. It was a 17,000 entries usually for the fan championship. So uphill battle for sure. But again, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're okay lighting that money on fire for a chance at a big payday, the fan championship is the best bet. But if not, then go for the other ones.
Yep, makes sense to me. So, all right, Brian, like you said, this is the time, part of the show where we get to the people start to drop off. And thank you, AI, for helping me create this logo. But it is time for the new meta stacks.
We need some theme music for that too.
And I just realized that the little character on the guy's chest looks like he's just getting eaten by an alien or something. But
AI, baby.
Yeah, clearly AI's got some work to do. So, what are these new meta stacks? We've been talking about them since week 1, week 2, where you take some of those, maybe not the best teams, maybe not the best stacks, but like we talked about with Cleveland, it does allow you to fit in a lot more better players, these studs, these expensive players that overall can help you win and has helped us win this week. So the first one that I have, let me go ahead and pull up my terrible stacks. Actually, I think I gotta go. I mean, there's not too many bad ones actually this week.
I know. I was just thinking we got the new graphics for it, and the stacks aren't that horrific this week compared to previous weeks.
So what I'll say is that Dallas and Carolina side, if we're talking about Carolina, yeah, that's tough. Again, it's just kind of one of those. We have cheap players, and Carolina has known to put up points as well. I'm trying to look at my notes here. We do.
Are they known to put up points? Bryce Young and company.
Trying to help them out, but you have DJ Chark coming back after last week. There's some tight end of Hayden Hurst is out, so if you want to go, maybe Tommy Tremble. But I think this is one of those things where it's like good stack with Dallas, but you can bring it back with there's some weapons on Carolina that you pray and hope for. You get this cheap piece with the correlation. So maybe not necessarily the new meta stack. This is just kind of like a good stack with a cheap Curtis Samuel piece.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, again, I don't really know. We have maybe I have one in here that I can throw in for new meta stacks, but that actually does raise a question. Chris talked about it in the plug as well. This is one of the first weeks moves where we've had so many double-digit favorites. I'm just looking at the spreads now, right? So we have Dallas minus 10.5. We have Jacksonville minus 7, Miami minus 13, Washington minus 10, Detroit minus 8, San Francisco minus 11.5, Buffalo minus 7.5. And typically, once we see double-digit spreads, we know historically that we don't really want to bring it back in a game stack, right? They don't get there as often as tighter spreads generally do. So something to keep in mind this week. We're building. Now, we get questions all the time. Should I 2x1? Should I 3x1? Should I 2x0? This week, if you're playing the larger spreads, consider not bringing it back with someone. And unless it's, I mean, if you're going to play that guy anyways, sure, but don't force it out of necessity. But that's also a nice little transition here. Moves to, I like the Washington side here. Antonio Gibson's out, and I think they'll actually run more than they have all year with Brian Robinson here. But if they maintain their really high neutral situational pass rate, they obviously can go ham on the Giants as everybody has done. Look at what the Cowboys did last week. Don't need to bring it back with anybody. You just play a 2-0 commander stack, 3-0 commander stack. But they rank the same as some of these other teams that we've been talking about already, Moose. And, not necessarily that unaffordable compared to some of these other stacks for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not playing Tommy DeVito, who threw for I think air yards, maybe threw 5 air yards last week. It was a bad performance. It was.
Did
really
you see
bad.
local sub shop brought him his own? I think it was a chicken parm sub on Friday. After he said his mom cooks for him and stuff. So the dude's gonna get some sponsorship deals, whether or not he actually plays plays well in the field. It sounds like.
I know. It's like I said in the staff chat. He literally was like, "My mom makes my bed," and then went out and did the worst quarterback performance of any player
and
ever.
then plays like his mom makes his bed.
Yeah. Bryce Ridley in the chat says, "Hey, fellas, I got a 3-part question. First one is Mahomes or Dak this week."
Let's see all 3 parts of the question, Bryce. Send all 3
Yeah.
parts and let us know if it's DFS or if it's season long. Let us know.
Yeah, let us if it's DFS, let us know site and contest type. If it's fantasy, let us know if it needs to be PPR or not, all that stuff like that. So, I'm trying to look. We're almost out of time as well, so I'll just hurry up and just quickly talk about the other stack that I had. I had the Chargers, weapons, cheap piece, a couple cheap pieces in there. There is Everett out, so opens up more space. There's Keenan Allen and Guyton are questionable. I think they're both going to play. Guyton might be more questionable, but again, it's just one of those things where if he's out, if any of them are out, target share goes. The target's got to go somewhere. Probably going to coordinate to wide receiver 1s, 2s of that. So I like it if one of those people are out. Anything you want to say about that?
I like that game as well. And really, what opened my eyes was, Gerald Everett being out. Donald Parham last time didn't have a full-time role the last time Everett was out. I think it was week 8. But did draw 5 targets, and we get 5 targets at his price and his skill set. He's the type of guy that can score multiple touchdowns and outscore a McBride or Kincaid or someone. It's rare, but he's only going to be 1% owned, I would imagine. So I do like that side of the ball. Just got to monitor the injury reports. I like Green Bay as well. Christian Watson, underperforming wide receiver. I will say, last week he was 1 to 2% owned. This week he is 10 to 11% owned, which means he's guaranteed to score a touchdown now that he's higher owned. Still an underperforming wide receiver nonetheless. And I like stacking Jordan Love on that side too.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So before we get to Bryce's 3 questions, Mike has a question here. High risk lineups. Do you like Pat Freiermuth coming off the IR? What do you think about Pat, Brian?
Good question. That is just a game environment we're not thrilled about. But I can't imagine anyone's playing him, and I can't imagine they would activate him if he wasn't 100%. But just know that first game back from hamstring is the highest likelihood of re-injuring it. So I probably won't be playing Freiermuth, but if there's a reason you like playing him in a 32-point total game, I say go for it. It's not going to be someone that's at the top of our list this week.
Yep, exactly. So, and then Bryce's question. So all fantasy PPR, Mahomes or Dak? I will say Dak.
Yeah, I'll say, let me pull up some stuff here. I'll say Mahomes or Dak. I will say Dak's been hot, and he's got the better weapons against Carolina. I will say Dak. I know Mahomes probably rates a little better, but I'll say Dak.
Yep. And then it is PPR. So start 2, Aaron Jones, Brian Robinson, Kenneth Walker, or Monty. I think one, especially for me, Brian Robinson.
Yep.
Right.
Agree. Who's your Gibson out?
Yeah. What about your other one?
I'll go with David Montgomery. In a good game environment there, and as a 7 or 8 point home favorite, I'll say there. And then at flex, consider the other 2 running backs, Christian Kirk and Adam Thielen. I'll say Christian Kirk this week, underperforming wide receiver. The opposing Titans are missing their starting corner again, so I'll say Christian Kirk.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds pretty much perfect to me. I like that as well. And then to close it off, I got one more graphic. Please don't hate me, AI. And this is the generic fast food play of the week. What is this? It's because a fast food restaurant hasn't sponsored us yet, so we have to be a generic fast food logo. If you're a fast food restaurant, you want to go ahead and sponsor this segment of the show, please reach out to us. We will definitely show it off every stream. But basically, this is a low-owned, cheap wide receiver who's going to score a touchdown. How does that correlate to fast food? Because at a time pinch, they're maybe not so popular, may not be the best for your lineup, but when it hits, it hits. So I love it. So I have it filtered here, Brian. 5K or less on DraftKings, 10% or less ownership. There's actually a handful of names in here that aren't terrible.
Yeah.
And normally I go first, but I'll let you go first this time.
Christian Watson has since dropped below 10% since the last time I looked, so technically he does qualify for this, but he's a little higher owned. I'll go Jackson Smith and Jigba with Tyler Lockett banged up.
Ooh, that's interesting. Okay. You talked to me about the Washington side. I'm actually going to go the original Curtis Samuel to score. 3,600, 3% owned on both, projected on both sites. Excuse me, there we go. And let's see here. And then we have a chat in here from DJ Promethazine and Cayenne, which is a wild name. Can you guys a video on, I don't know what that means, favorite anytime touchdown scorer segment?
I don't know. He's trying to promote his own things. DJ promo over here.
I guess so, yeah. But yeah, we just talked about some guys we like to score a touchdown. Go ahead and bet those. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for me. Brian, any last thoughts before I close it out?
No, UFC starts now, so I'm going to hop off here. If you guys have any questions, we'll monitor Discord throughout the next 24 hours or so, and happily to answer them. Check Chris's video that went live last night. Read the Daily Plug, and all the typical stuff. Make sure you check us out.
Absolutely, yep. So that'll do it. Until next week, Moose and Brian from Occupy Fantasy. Have a good day.
Peace.